Hey, mamas. Today on the show, I talked with a PMS and health hormone coach named Rebecca Paisley. We talked about how PMS is common, but not normal. We don't have to suffer every month. We went into strategies and tactics for how to start regulating your cycle, and some of these have actually been working really well for me. Before we get into the interview, I wanted to give you a quick primer on the menstrual cycle so that you understand the terms that we use throughout the discussion. This is part of a longer video that I published that talks through how to optimize your cycle. So I'll leave a link in the description for that. Okay, so for the menstrual cycle, the first thing you need to know about is the hormones involved. So there are 4 key ones: estrogen, progesterone, LH, and FSH. Estrogen is responsible for the stereotypical female sex characteristics. It increases endometrial and uterine growth, and it's also responsible for things like metabolism, gut health, the amount of fat that you have, muscle mass, and even vaginal lubrication. Progesterone is responsible for maintaining a pregnancy. So it prepares the body for conception, and then it maintains the growth of the baby throughout pregnancy. Follicle stimulating hormone, or as we usually call it, FSH, this is the hormone responsible for controlling the menstrual and egg production cycle, and it actually stimulates the follicles of the ovary to grow and prepare to release an egg. Luteinizing hormone, LH, causes the ovary to release an egg. It also helps in maintaining pregnancy by triggering that progesterone release. So here is the whole overview of the menstrual cycle. You see at the bottom, we have this broken into 4 phases: menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. In the full video on this, I go into all of these cycles in a lot of detail. For now, we're just going to talk about kind of what those hormones are doing and what you might expect to feel during each phase of the cycle. So during the menstrual phase, hormones are really low. And especially estrogen being low, that's part of what causes you to feel pretty low yourself. So you can see over the course of the follicular phase, estrogen starts pretty low, starts to ramp up, peaks in the ovulatory phase, and then drops off a cliff for the luteal phase. And again, that luteal phase into the menstrual phase is kind of where you start to feel low energy, and estrogen has a lot to do with that. Looking at progesterone, which is the blue line, it stays pretty low through most of the menstrual cycle. It only ramps up after ovulation. That LH tells it, hey, it's time to ramp up in case there's a pregnancy. And you can see as you go through the luteal phase, your body realizes that there's no pregnancy. So progesterone dips back down. And that's kind of the last thing that happens before you start your menstrual cycle. FSH and LH kind of have the same pattern here. They're very low for the first part of your cycle. They have a sharp peak right at ovulation time, and then they go back down to baseline levels for the rest of the cycle. I want to zoom in on the luteal phase just for a moment, because this is the phase of the cycle where most people, if you have PMS symptoms, this is where they're going to come in. And a lot of people don't know that the estrogen to progesterone ratio is the root cause of a lot of the symptoms. And you can control that ratio by the foods that you eat. Some foods that have properties that flush estrogen from your system, some have properties that increase estrogen. So depending on whether you have estrogen dominance, or progesterone dominance, you might strategically change your diet in certain ways. And I do have some food charts in this deck that I go through in the other video, so feel free to check that out. I think for now, you have the fundamentals that you need for the talk with Rebecca. So without further ado, here's my chat with Rebecca. All right. Hello, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to be here today.
Thank you. I'm really excited for this conversation. I feel like this is a topic that many women don't even know to think about. It's just a thing that happens to them and they have to live with it. So I guess for the audience, we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle today. It sounds super exciting, right? And we kind of have a bomb to drop for everyone, which is, PMS is not normal. You don't have to suffer every month. And I feel like nobody knows that. So before we get into that, I wanted to start with you, Rebecca, just a little bit about you. You are a PMS and hormone coach. So can you tell us about how did you get into that? What is that? How long have you been doing it?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for probably about the last 3 years or so, taking it more full time in the last year. And I got into it from my own health journey. So from the point of like 18 to 23-ish, I had a lot of period problems and everything from heavy periods, severe mood swings, severe pain, losing jobs because I would just call out every month like, "Hey, I'm not going to be there for the next 3 days." And I kept going back to the doctor and getting just crazy answers, you know? It's like, "Oh, well, you can just try birth control or you can have a hysterectomy or don't exercise or
At
eat more food."
18, a hysterectomy at like 20 years old?
I think I was 22 when
Oh
he
my
told me that,
God.
yeah. And I was like, "No, you've lost your marbles." And so it was like, because I refused birth control. So he was like, "Well, if you won't take birth control, this is your only other option."
Mm.
And I was like, "Well, this isn't." And after that appointment was when I was like, "This I can't do this anymore." Like, they don't know anything. The only solution they have is birth control. And so I started to dig into like more natural ways to deal with it. It's like there's got to be a different way to do this. And so I stumbled across different healing modalities along the way and then eventually found a healing modality called Ayurveda, which is like the oldest healthcare system out of India. And they use diet, lifestyle, and herbs to get the body back into balance, and then like the body heals itself. And so after figuring out my problems and healing, I was like, all right, there's something to this. I'm really into it. And so I went back to school and studied, and I'm in the process of wrapping up a master's in Ayurveda right now. And that's kind of a little bit about how I got here. Was just like my own journey and then realizing that like so many women get the same response of like, here's
Yes.
birth
We're
control,
just
here's
crazy women
pharmaceuticals.
that have to deal with this. So what kind of symptoms and conditions do you help with?
So I help people with pretty much all period problems. So painful periods, people that are dealing with PMDD or just PMS symptoms, getting people with PCOS to start having regular cycles, helping people with endometriosis have less and less pain. Some of these conditions, depending on the length of time you've had them or how severe they are, they're not necessarily going to be completely reversed. It's always going to just be something you're managing. But you can get to the point where, it's not taking weeks out of your month
Mm.
every month.
You mentioned PMDD. Can you tell the listeners what that means?
Yeah, so PMDD is not it has a lot of the same classifications as PMS where you have mood swings and cramps and heavy bleeding or other irregularities in your cycle, but it's more extreme. So for like your entire 2 weeks before your cycle begins, you're not wanting to get out of bed, you feel like a completely different person, you could have suicidal thoughts, um, be super mean and angry. And so a lot of times these people are given like antidepressants or antipsychotics. Some therapists that like aren't educated on the female cycle will be like, "Oh, you're bipolar because you go from happy to sad
Oh,
in
geez.
a cycle." So that is kind of the PMDD. It can be super debilitating where holding a job is near impossible because for 2 weeks you're like, this bed is where I'm staying.
Wow.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of lifestyle factors that can contribute to, having these kind of symptoms. What would you say are the like top 3 things that women do that they don't know they're doing that are probably leading to some discomfort or, these issues with their period?
I would say just our fast-paced lifestyle of like always feeling like we need to be doing something to be considered productive or useful. And so that's definitely number one is like not
Guilty.
prioritizing rest. Yeah. It's so hard because like you get wrapped up and the world's moving at that pace. So it's like for you to step back and be like, nope, I'm going to rest today out of the ordinary to do. So that would be the number one thing is like, slowing down and taking time for yourself instead of just go, 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 go. And then the second one would probably be just the foods you're eating. We've grown up in a world where they're like, oh, if you want to be skinny, skip a meal or eat salads. And it's like all the things that you shouldn't really be doing. We should be getting enough protein 3 times a day and not eating such cold foods, eating more like warm, cooked, easy to digest foods. Then number three, I would just say it's like not being educated about your cycle because it kind of ties in with the number one. Like, we just live on the man's clock of 24 hours, and we're really on like a 28, 30 day, 32 day, depending on your cycle clock. Like, we have the 24-hour clock, but in reality, it's like that whole month long, things are shifting. So it's like the first week, you can have energy for this, and the second week, energy for that, and third or fourth week is time to rest. And
Yeah,
like
that
the
was
more,
something that was really interesting to me when I read Alyssa Vidi's books was the infradian versus circadian rhythms. I think that's what you're referring to. Circadian's a 24-hour, it's like the day, like men get all of their testosterone in the morning and they just use it up throughout the day, which is why they get up early and work, 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 and then, quit at 4 or 5, and then rest in the evening. And then women, we have the infradian rhythm, which I had never heard of. And this is that, 28, 30 some day cycle that we live on, which is more of like we have weeks at a time of a journey that we're going through, not just 24 hours. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing. It'd be really cool if we could start changing the way we live a little bit.
yeah. Well, and I think it's kind of starting to happen a little bit just with like being able to work from home some days or having that remote ability for people because then during like, your luteal phase right before you get your period, you can be like, "Hey, I need to work from home Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week." And it's like you can lay in bed and work on your computer and like get some like you're still having to do something, but you're getting closer to that resting phase.
Right, right. So I think that was a really great introduction. I kind of want to get into just like practical and tactical strategies women can use to get to like a more regulated cycle. This is like this topic is so overwhelming because you start to look into it and there's just so much information. Should you change? You feel like you should change every part of your life, like toiletries, cleaning products, food, exercise, like, and then you just like sit there like, okay, I don't even know where to begin. So, whenever you're working with a new client, how do you go about figuring out where to start? And, what are the things you think would be the biggest bang for your buck, or is it like really dependent on the person?
So it is dependent on the person, but I would say when I work with someone, we do like, a detailed intake form to see what's going on in their life. A lot of times I start with that number one thing we all ignore of slowing down. It's like, hey, you need to find 20 minutes a day to just chill. Like, you are constantly doing stuff from 6 a.m. till 9 o'clock at night. Find somewhere in there to do nothing. Like, read a book, sit in the bath, do something like that. So that's one of the big things that gets incorporated. But then otherwise, you're looking mainly at like the foods we're eating, what water we're drinking, if we're having coffee or alcohol, sugars, really what's going into the body. I know, like you said, looking at like, the candles you're burning and the type of Tupperware you're using and the pans you're cooking on, that stuff plays a role, but it's like the foods you eat is the biggest part of what's going into your body. So looking
Yeah.
at that first and then slowly starting to get rid of the other stuff over time. But like switching from plastic Tupperware to glass Tupperware is one very expensive and
It's an
it's like
optimization.
yeah, it's like it's easier to do it in small pieces. Like, oh, I have to throw a bunch of plastic Tupperware away because it's bad. Like, it's cracked, it's turning colors. At that point, go and make those changes. Like, don't go into your kitchen and throw everything away and then go spend thousands of dollars
Right, right.
on
All right. So
look
yeah, as
more.
we talk through this stuff, hopefully our listeners will take that to heart and not think they need to go throw everything away. So maybe we can start with food then. One thing that I think is so interesting is the way that we should be, incorporating certain types of food in every week of the cycle. So I'm wondering if you could just kind of give an overview of what kind of things to focus on food-wise during each week of the cycle. And then we can talk about things that matter across the cycle, like maybe you have thoughts on organic versus not or something like that.
Right. So from like an Ayurvedic point of view, if you start with the menstrual cycle, your body's already detoxing and like trying to do lots of work at that point. So just eating super easy to digest foods, whether it's like soups or cooked vegetables and like warm milk with spices, and just focusing on stuff that's super easy to digest. It really focuses on like soups or like doing rice with some vegetables and adding some digestive spices like turmeric and ginger in there, just so the body doesn't have to like actually focus on it. It's like it's a lot easier to digest something that's already cooked than trying to live off cold salads. And like when you eat the cold food, it makes everything in your body cold, and you're trying to like stay warm to like keep things moving. And then throughout the rest of the cycle, that's going to really, at least from an Ayurvedic point of view, depend on the person. So say somebody's dealing with like lots of PMS, anger, irritability, they're going to focus on more like cooling foods like coconut and cucumber and pomegranate, um, squash and zucchini, stuff like that. And then somebody that's like dealing with more anxiety or like backaches and cramps type of thing would focus more on those like warm foods where it's, carrots cooked in butter or ghee, or the vegetable soups, or just very warm, like grounding food, that food that you kind of think about when you like go home to your mom or your grandma and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm home. Feels so good. That type of stuff. And then people that are more like lethargic or depressed or just like feeling heavier or bloated would focus on the lighter food. So not eating so many oily fried food, stuff with butter and that, more light things like stir fries would be a light food and stuff like that. But there's also, I know from like a Western point of view, foods you should be eating during each phase. And so it's like important, right before your cycle to start eating all those iron building foods because you're about to lose all of that iron when you bleed. So it's like build it all up.
So that's like
And
red meat if you eat meat and,
red meat,
spinach and things.
broccoli, spinach, that type of stuff. hmm That
Mm,
would be the best stuff before the cycle.
okay. Yeah. So in the, um, Flow Living books, I forget the title. In the Flow, I think is one of them. She
Yeah.
talks really extensively about eating, like she has charts about what food to eat during each week. So I guess
hmm
that's kind of like a different layer than the perspective you're coming from.
Yep. So it's just a different outlook. I mean, it's important. It's basically she wants you to get certain nutrients during each week, um, so that your body's prepared to bleed and not have all the PMS symptoms. And it's like it's certain oils and fats and proteins and carbs for each of the weeks. Just from the background that I come from, it's more focused on the individual than it is like a generic, like, here's a chart that everybody can use. Because some people are dealing with like the anger side or the mood swings, and some people are just super anxious and in a lot of pain. And then there's also the group that's like bloated and depressed. And so there's different things you can do for each one of them. I think the main thing for food wise, from both perspectives, is that like blood sugar balance of like keeping your blood sugar stabilized throughout the day. So there's less of this going on, like
Hmm.
the waves of up and down, and a more steadiness. So you're not like having to snack all day or eating late into the night. And that's kind of where the making sure you're getting like 30 to 40 grams of protein at each meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, come in, because then you're going to have that sustained energy to carry you over to lunch. Whereas if you just like eat a bowl of oatmeal, it's just going to shoot your blood sugar up and then drop it right back down.
Yeah,
But
so I
if
was going
you
to
have,
actually ask you about this. I actually used to eat oatmeal every day for breakfast until I started really experimenting. Now I'm eating like meat or eggs and, just a lot of more savory foods. So I guess what sort of advice do you have for women to avoid the, sugar crash kind of thing?
so it's look at your amount of protein on your plate. So if you do really enjoy oatmeal in the morning for breakfast, add a scoop of protein powder to it. Or make something on the side like some sausage or ground meat or eggs or something else that's going to sustain you when you're just eating carbs, which is basically what oatmeal is. You're going to go up and you're going to go down. So it's like, look at your plate and say, okay, I have lots of vegetables, I have lots of rice, but now my meat is like only taking up a small portion of the plate. Like you might want to increase that because you'll
Do you
notice
think
a difference.
it's a lot about the beginning of the day, how you start your day? What kind of set the tone?
I would think so, I would say so because it's like when you wake up in the morning, if you're not hungry, it's a sign that something's off with your hormones. So, like people that wake up and immediately have coffee after coffee and then don't eat until lunch, it's like something is off in the morning, or you're just suppressing all of your hunger with coffee. The more that you get your cycle and your hormones into balance, the more you'll wake up in the morning. And it's that first meal where it's like once you get it in and nourish your body, now you're set to kind of be on a rhythm. You should try to be eating at like the same time every day. So if you have breakfast at 8, always have breakfast at 8. If you have lunch at noon, always have it at noon or within like, an hour or so. It doesn't have to be right at noon every day, but between noon and 1, getting that second meal in. Because the more you can,
What do you think about how often should we be eating?
just the 3 times a day. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then if you're getting enough protein at each meal, you shouldn't want to snack in between. If you do for some reason want to snack in between, having some nuts or some, oh, my brain just went blank. Nuts are really the best one. Almonds and walnuts are really good for your nervous system and your brain, but also any other kind of like snack if you do like, some cooked veggies or crackers, but crackers aren't really the greatest snack. All the snack food's just not that good for you, so it's hard to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, have a snack.
I know what I do. So I'm I'm still breastfeeding. And so I
Okay.
found that I need to eat every 3 hours or I either crash or I become irritable and I don't even feel that hungry, but it's like I'm missing something. I need something. And I used to try to drink. I don't drink much caffeine while I'm breastfeeding, but like I would have this, mid-morning coffee when I would feel an energy dip. And then I realized, oh, I'm just needing more food.
Yeah.
So I think that was something that took me a long time to figure out. So yeah, I think before, when I wasn't breastfeeding, I only ate 3 meals a day, but I try to do foods that are either kind of like mini meals. So I'm not eating like a, snack food, or sometimes I make a smoothie. So
Yeah.
I'm getting at least a decent amount of nutrients while eating a snack. So I did
Well,
want to talk
when
to you
you're
about, oh, go ahead.
different, because you're giving so much energy away that snacking is definitely necessary. Another snack that's like good and has protein is you can make those little like energy balls at home where it's like usually like oatmeal and a nut butter and some protein powder and maybe some coconut flakes or nuts, and you roll them into balls and then you can have those as snacks because it's actually going to fill up, where a lot of snacks like chips or crackers, like you can just eat and eat and eat and never be full.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mhm.
they don't really, they kind of cause more harm than good a lot of times. So caffeine, what are your thoughts on caffeine?
um
Controversial. Could be
yes,
controversial
it is.
topic.
If you're gonna have it, like have breakfast first. So wake up in the morning, drink a cup of water, like actually hydrate yourself before, because caffeine's dehydrating. So it's like you've been asleep all night, you hydrate yourself with some water, have breakfast, and then have your coffee. And try not to be, going over 1 to 2 cups a day. When you have coffee first, you suppress your hunger. So then like you're more likely to skip breakfast and then all of a sudden like it's almost lunchtime and you're shaking and you're anxious and you're like, what's going on? And it's like, it's the caffeine jitters that are
Mhm.
causing this.
Yeah, I never actually so I stopped drinking coffee recently and I
Mhm.
loved it. I loved espressos. I used to make myself some every morning, kind of like pre-workout. I would have that and I just loved it. And then I was having a couple hours later, I would just feel kind of like maybe a little jittery, but the main symptom was like I just felt like I needed to eat stuff. And it was like my stomach was a little bit upset. And I was like, maybe I just need to eat something. And I realized that, if I didn't eat something, I was getting a little shaky and things like that. So I was like, wait a second, this is the caffeine. Like, if I just don't eat this, then I won't feel, or don't drink this, I won't feel like this anymore. So I stopped drinking it and I replaced it with some different teas. And yeah, it's been a lot better.
Yeah, there's a lot of some people just really like the taste of coffee, so they don't
Yes,
want to
that was
give it.
me.
And there's a lot of coffee replacements on the market now, whether it's like they make ones out of mushrooms, they make ones out of herbs. If you just Google coffee replacement, like a whole plethora of options will come up. And that can be your like, you start if you have 2 cups of coffee, switch one of them to the alternate, and then slowly, like every other day to the alternate. And it's amazing, like I know a lot of people are like, "I have to have caffeine to wake up, like, that's the only way." And I'm like, "Yeah, but if you just, like, were tired for a week and didn't have coffee, like, yes, you're gonna be really tired for that week, but after that, like, and your body's detoxed from the caffeine and you're just, like, drinking water and staying hydrated, you're gonna have more energy."
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
read something, maybe it was like a Chinese proverb or something where they were like, caffeine steals energy from tomorrow for today. So anytime I'm like, I could go for a coffee, I like to think of that and I'm like, maybe not.
yeah.
Um, so what do you think about organic versus not organic food?
So I mean, you definitely wanna favor organic food as much as possible. There's, I don't remember the list off the top of my head, but there's
Clean
like a
15, dirty dozen from Environmental Working Group. Yep.
that's a good one to follow, especially if you're on a budget, because it's like now you can pick the most important ones that are like heavily sprayed, always touching pesticides, and try to get those organic. And then the rest of them, you do what you can. Another good way is using farmers markets or finding local farms in your area if that exists for you. It is important. I mean, the glyphosate they're spraying can be, if it gets into your body, and then there's studies showing that like if it's in the mother's body and she gets pregnant, it's actually like found in the baby's body after birth. So it's something that's like it's not something you're just ingesting and it's hiding out and then like going away when you do a detox or a cleanse. It's
Yeah.
something that's like really digging deep into your body and staying for a while.
And it has harmful side effects too. Like it's not good to have that floating around your bloodstream. So I agree that doing the, dirty dozen list from Environmental Working Group is a good way to go. The thing that I learned this year was that that list is only fresh produce. And what I didn't know was that flour and like grain products are often sprayed with glyphosate as a way to keep them from spoiling or from drying out or something like that. So now it's like I needed to add flour and, different grains to my list of things that I would rather buy organic because, you know, it's not really advertised that they do that kind of chemical treatment, but it's
Yeah,
there.
and I've actually met some people where they think they're like they have a gluten sensitivity
I should
and
say.
they give up gluten and all of these things and like they're still having problems. And it's like then they go and find like locally sourced flour or start making their own stuff, and they can eat it without any problems. And it's like it's not always the gluten, sometimes it's the glyphosate causing the problem. And there's just like so much stuff is sprayed nowadays and so much stuff is has weird preservatives and other stuff in it that
Mhm.
isn't needed unless it's because the stores need it on the shelf for 6 months,
Yeah.
and that's the reason it's getting sprayed.
So don't shop in the middle of the stores. Shop around the outside.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's also some
That's
easy advice.
that's, like, the best advice to give people is, like, just go to the outside because that's all of your dairy, your fresh stuff,
Mhm.
and then try to go to the inside.
Yeah. I know some people have issues with dairy as well. And I think
Mhm.
part of that is the treatments they get. Like you would definitely want to avoid the hormones in the dairy and, antibiotics and stuff. And then there's like a kind of dairy, I think it's called A2 proteins or something. I think that's easier to digest.
Yep.
Some people just don't handle dairy well though.
Yeah.
So the last thing about food I wanted to ask you was seed cycling. That's all over the internet. What do you think about seed cycling? Do you recommend that?
So it is a practice that is used in Ayurveda and used in other things. If you look in like the medical research world, there's not a whole lot of info on it. So it's hard to, especially someone with like a scientific mind that's like really wants the evidence to do it. But I have personally used it in the past and I have a lot of friends that have done it. And it definitely is helpful in like starting to regulate the cycle and get ovulation to happen and for things to regulate out. I think if you're having like super severe PMS or even further problems, there's more that has to be done than just eating the pumpkin, flax, sunflower, and sesame
Yeah, so
seeds.
maybe just explain real quick what seeds, like what the cadence and what the seeds are that you cycle through.
Yeah, first half of the cycle, you it's four seeds that you're using. So you're using sesame, sunflower, pumpkin, and flax seeds, and you switch off between the two. So for like from your period until you ovulate, you're doing flax and pumpkin. And
Mm.
then from ovulation until the first day that you bleed, you're doing sesame and sunflower. And you're supposed to take the seeds, and you can buy like a coffee grinder that you don't use for coffee and put the seeds in and grind them up, or you can get a mortar and pestle and crush them. And so by crushing them, you open them up, they become easier to digest. It kind of activates the stuff in the seeds, and then you eat them. You can just eat them by the spoonful, uh, toss them on salads, put them on yogurt, put them on any meal, vegetables, rice,
We talking
whatever
like a
you're eating.
tablespoon or a day or something?
Oh, 1 tablespoon of each.
Okay,
That's an
okay.
important part. So 1 tablespoon of each. The flax seeds are really hard to grind up sometimes because they're just already so like tiny and hard. I've also had people that, it's like a time thing where they don't have time to grind them up fresh every day. And so they're just sprinkling them on the food and making sure they chew really well so that
Yeah.
they're not just swallowing whole
You can
seeds.
get
So
flaxseed
either
meal
way,
too. It's all pre-ground.
yeah. And the theory behind it is like the different oils and nutrients in the seeds are like helping to balance the hormones throughout the cycle. And so I've definitely seen it work for a lot of people where it really benefits them and it gets rid of mild PMS symptoms and starts to get things to be regular where your cycle is the same amount of days every month. But yeah, for the person that's like very science based, you're not going to find any meta analysis on it or clinical
Hmm.
studies to support it. But Ayurveda's been using that method for thousands of years to help people regulate their cycle. And so it definitely, I would say, is,
Has something to it. Yeah.
yeah, has something to it. And if you're just trying to figure out how to do something on your own without necessarily like hiring a coach or going to the doctor. It's like that's somewhere super easy to start where
Hmm.
and you can like, after 2 or 3 months, notice, okay, is it making a difference or is it not? It's never gonna be like a 30-day thing. You're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this was like a miracle worker.
Yeah.
Um Typically I see people like make big changes 2 to 3 months after really implementing the
Yeah,
info.
not just seed cycling, just whatever changes. Yeah. Okay, I was going to ask you
Exactly.
that. So 2 to 3 months. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So food. We talked about food. Is there anything else on food that you think we should mention?
Don't think so. I think you got a lot of it all covered.
All right. So what about toxins in our home, on our bodies? What are the worst offenders that you kind of ask your clients to get rid of or stop using?
So, one big thing is looking at your pans that you're cooking in. because the food is like the number one thing going into your body. And so trying to stay away from all the nonstick pans. I know they're very convenient, but getting away from the nonstick pans as much as possible, trying not to microwave stuff, especially microwaving it in plastic. And so that's a big one for sure. And then also looking at like what's going on in your house. So do you have like air fresheners in every room? Do you have Febreze next to every toilet? Are your candles using essential oils or artificial fragrances? Because that's all stuff that you're breathing in constantly and like absorbing. And so that's a big one. Even your laundry detergent can, it's like it's on your skin 24/7. So switching to a more natural, clean one or just using Castile soap and essential oils
Do you have a
really
laundry
just like
detergent that you like to use, or do you use the Castile soap?
I personally just use unscented Castile soap with essential oils, and I switch the essential oils out sometimes. One's like, I don't know, it's some blend that is for cleaning, and then orange or citrus is another one I like, or lavender is a good one. Lavender doesn't really hold the smell that well through the hot water and stuff. If you're one of those people that like has to have
Wants to
them
smell the,
like,
yeah, the freshness.
clean.
So on that same like vein, along those same lines, the like cleaning products and things like that. Do you make your own? Do you have like brands that you like?
So I keep it pretty simple with cleaning products. I will use Castile soap mixed with water for a lot of things. And then if I need like some scrubbing action because there's just like extra dirt, using baking soda. And then also vinegar mixed with essential oils is another one. That's like was our like, before cleaning products existed, what people used for cleaning products. Also just using, like lemon essential oil will get a lot of dirt off of things like very quickly. I'm always amazed. Like I'll have like these, I don't know, like weird goo from stickers or something that comes on stuff and like just put some dabs of lemon or orange, like any citrus essential oil, and it like will almost wipe totally off without
Really?
much effort. I'm always really amazed by it.
Wow.
And then I mean, Seventh Generation makes good cleaning products. There's a couple other like cleaner brands out there that you can find. And then like we still have our Christmas tree up right now.
Me too. No judgment.
And I'm gonna, before we take it down, I'm gonna chop off branches. And what you do is you take the pine branches and you soak them in vinegar for like 4 to 6 weeks. And then
Really?
that is like it'll smell all nice and piney. And so it'll be like homemade pine salt.
Hmm.
So you can do that with your Christmas tree. And
Wow.
then that's kind of what I try to keep it as simple as possible with cleaning. Because then it's like you can just buy a gallon of Castile soap and it's going to clean everything.
Yeah,
And a
that's
gallon.
great.
So
There's
then it's like a
also more brands are there's starting to be more brands popping up to support this clean idea. And so, often I'll check environmental working group site to see, what are the verified products, and then I'll just choose those if I'm not uh, you know, making everything myself.
yeah. Yeah, because making everything yourself can be one, time consuming, and you just might not have the time. So the ease of buying stuff can be nice, especially if you're in a crunch.
Yeah.
My mom uses a certain brand, and it's like they give you the big spray bottle, but then they just keep sending you little concentrated bottles of the
Is it
stuff. So
Branch
you just
Basics?
it might be.
And then I've
Um,
I've heard of that one. I've been using a brand called Attitude.
okay,
I think they're based in Europe, but they have everything, like
yeah,
deodorant and, shampoo and cleaning products, and they have this spray for, when your pet makes a mess in your house. And it works so well, and it doesn't leave like a harsh smell afterwards. I'm really sensitive to those harsh cleaning product smells too. So yeah, that's a brand that I've been using a lot, and, a lot of their stuff's EWG verified. So,
nice.
you know, for those of us who don't have time to be mixing stuff all the time, sometimes
Mhm.
it's time or money. That's kind of always the trade-off.
Yep.
Okay, what else? So we talked a little bit. I just touched on, toiletries a little bit, like shampoos, and there's just like
Yep.
nasty stuff in cosmetics and shampoos. How does that conversation usually go with your clients? Do you like interview them about what they use, or do you kind of just leave that because once you hit the big things, maybe this isn't quite so bad?
So, yes and no. It really ends up depending on the person and how far out of whack they are. It's like for someone dealing with like minor PMS, there's obviously not that much toxicity going on in their house. But people that are having like super severe problems, I will dig deeper into certain things or just like make suggestions. Hey, this I use this brand, check it out, type of thing. And because it is, like, you're putting it on your skin. So if you're constantly lathering up with, like, scented lotions that, like, are from Bath& and Body Works, like,
So bad.
there's gonna be problems, you know?
Mm.
So it's like, alright, find an unscented lotion, and that's, like, more natural and clean, and add your own fragrance to it with essential oils, or find a natural-based lotion that you like that doesn't have all of the chemicals in it. And, I mean, it starts to make a difference. I especially touch on it with people that are dealing with a lot of skin issues or, like, have acne problems, because then it's like, yes, acne definitely starts, like, in the gut and what you're eating, but if you're just, like, layering on all of this nasty stuff and then, like, on top of it, it's like it's not actually cleaning your face, it's just making it worse. And then when you
Yes,
stop
there's
using.
reactions, and then things that strip the oil makes you make more oil, so you're kind of worse
Yeah.
off.
Mhm. Yeah. So just helping them find options that are, like, available, and the other part is, like, not everybody's budget can handle going 100% organic and buying new cookware and throwing everything out and replacing it. So it's like, all right, what can your budget handle? Can it handle switching your shampoo when your current bottle's gone? Like we all know you're going to have to buy another bottle regardless. Can you spend 3 extra dollars to buy a different brand that is less toxic, doesn't have the parabens and all of that in it, or artificial fragrances. They put artificial colors in it. And so it's like making the switches as things run out. It's like, well, you're gonna go buy something. So here's like some info on what you should buy.
Yeah,
Um,
so avoiding parabens, I think there's sulfates, the
sulfate,
fragrances,
fragrances. There's another one I can never pronounce it. The phthalates. It
phthalates,
starts.
phthalates, yeah.
I
Mhm.
always look at that word and I'm like, I don't know who decided to spell you that way. Um,
What do you think about sunscreen? That's another controversial topic.
Sunscreen. Yeah, so sunscreen's a funny one. So it's like you should definitely be avoiding the toxic ones. Um, Trying to get, I think it's like just the pure zinc oxide as much as possible. I do have a lot of people that complain because you have to rub it in for so long because it's like so much thicker. But it is, it's like your skin is your largest organ of your body. And we forget that our skin like is an organ, but it's the largest one. So it's like you have
And it
to
has its own microbiome. A lot of people don't know
exactly.
that either.
hmm Yeah, so it has its own microbiome going on. It's constantly like breathing in and out or sweating or constricting. It's always doing something for you. Um, so it's like it is important what you're putting on it. So sunscreen's a big one, like finding a good brand that is not full of other stuff. And plus it's like you don't need the other stuff. Like before, like if we go way back in history, they just had like the zinc oxide and that was
Mhm.
it. And then it like slowly got warped into like, oh, ones that make you glitter and ones that make you bronze and ones that make you smell good. It's like, okay, how about I just want to be protected from the sun?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
This is another one where it feels like there's finally starting to be some options for like mineral based, from different brands. And you can find that stuff on the Skin Deep database from EWG as well.
Yep.
Like, I don't buy stuff unless I look on there. I feel like I'm like a walking advertisement for them or something. But it's hard. It's so hard to know
Yeah.
otherwise.
Well, it's too much stuff to dig through.
Yeah.
And that's why it feels so overwhelming for people is you get online and all of a sudden you're being told like 100 things from it's like the best advice I personally give people is like start with one area. Like just look at like the air in your home. Like
Right.
are you like burning horrible candles and putting air fresheners out and like stuff, or is your air getting filtered at all? Do you have plants in the house? And then like once that's good and you feel comfortable with it and it doesn't feel overwhelming to go to the store and pick out a candle that's not toxic, then move on to the next thing. Like, okay, now I'm going to look at my makeup or my shampoo or whatever the next thing is for you. It's like don't try to go through your house and empty everything and replace it all because you're going to just like spend thousands of dollars and drive yourself insane.
Yes. Like you'll be sitting there reading, forums or reviews at like 3 a.m. Like you don't want to, that's not where you want to go. Just do one thing at a time. I just was looking at a book I have on my desk. I didn't really think about the, indoor air, plants thing. I was always a person that killed any plant that came into, contact with me. I was just no good with the green thumb. And then I started learning about how there's different plants that are they just clean the air. And they also get rid of
Mhm.
carbon dioxide, obviously, which is good. You don't want to have a really high CO2 environment either. But yeah,
Yeah.
plants is a pretty easy one to help the air quality in your house. I
Yeah, and
think
there's
one of the
some ones
last,
that
oh,
are
go ahead.
like there's certain plants that will just, you know, can be forgotten for a while and still live.
Yes, and
Oh,
winter. Like I was worried about, starting some plants in my house in the winter because there's like
mhm.
no light in, Michigan in the middle of winter. So
Yeah.
there's lots of good, blogs and books about the low barrier to entry plants, like for those of you that don't have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
The last thing I thought we could talk about is exercise. I think that's another one where you're like, you kind of just assume more is better. And so I'm curious about, what's your advice to people? What do you do in your own life? I know you're pretty big into yoga. What does that look like for you over the course of a month?
Yeah, so for exercise, just like as a general to go through like the phases is like on your follicular phase, which is right after you finish bleeding until you ovulate. That's like when you have the most energy to like go do things. So, doing the heavy weightlifting or going on like hardcore runs and really exerting yourself or trying new things that you haven't tried yet. And you can continue that through ovulation. And then once you start getting into that last phase before you bleed, the luteal phase, and that's where a lot of people have most of their PMS symptoms start to pop up, is when you should start like slowing down and not doing so much all the time. Choosing more like restorative things or going on walks instead of runs. If you do lift weights, not trying to like increase your weight during that time, but you can still lift. Um, and then once you start bleeding, really taking it easy to do like restorative yoga or yoga nidra, which is like you lay down and kind of it's like a waking sleep thing. And then meditation and just like taking it easy and listening to your body. And so for me, I typically go to the gym most days, but like as I get closer to starting my cycle, I don't like beat myself up for not going. I'm like, well, today's not, it's just not the day.
Yeah.
It's really about listening to your body. Like I know some weightlifters, they will not stop, they'll just go, 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 go. And that's like they've been doing it for so long and they're so comfortable with it that they don't really have huge issues from not slowing down. They definitely lift lighter on the days for their cycle. It's going to vary from person to person. The biggest thing is to like listen to your body and like for me, like my yoga practice will be way more hardcore during those like follicular ovulation phase where like you're trying the new things or you're trying to be on, do the hard poses or just like sweat more and get more of a workout in it. And then like as I start to transition over to like the more restful side of things, it's a lot of like restorative yoga or yin yoga where you're holding poses for a long time, or just doing like slow stuff. Or only like instead of an hour long practice, doing something for like 15 minutes and being like, okay, I moved a little bit today, the blood's flowing, but that's all I have the energy for. Like now I'm going to go sit in the bath or take a nap or have a cup of soup or tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely fall in that category of like the fitness enthusiast or whatever, where it's hard for me to want to stop. But that was another thing I realized as you kind of go through the breastfeeding. It took me a very long time to get my cycle back. And part of it was I realized I wasn't eating enough. Like I was eating enough to nourish myself and sustain my daughter, but it was, not enough
Mhm.
to, make the next baby or something. So eating was one, and then it was like the exercise. I had to really scale it back for a few months to kind of just let everything balance. So then, I've been trying to think more about, like you said, during the, follicular phase and the ovulatory phases, like that's when I can go hard and trying to figure out what kind of movements are still satisfying for me. I love to move. I like get the endorphin rush, all of those things. But kind
Mhm.
of take care of myself a little bit more in those like later parts. What do you say to those who aren't like me and they don't like to work out at all? Like they have a huge problem any time of the month getting to the gym or doing any type of movement.
So, I mean, I go through those phases too, where like I'll be super hardcore into it for 6 months, a year, and then like I'm like, okay, I need a break. And I don't really want to do anything, but it's like just try to go on walks and get outside and like move your, even if it's like I had one of my girlfriends that's also a yoga teacher. She's like, even if you just get on your mat for 7 minutes, like it doesn't have to be an hour long practice like when you go to a studio. Like just get on there for 7 minutes and move however you want to move, and that's it. And like slowly you'll have days where you want to do more and you'll have days where you want to do less. But as we age, especially as women, it's important to exercise and to really do some weight bearing things, because once we hit 30, our bone density goes down. So like that's why we're more likely to have osteoporosis and break hips and wrists and all of that as we age. So it's really important to do some kind of weight bearing activity, whether it's weightlifting or resistance training, or yoga has a lot of stuff that you're bearing your own weight and having to support yourself and putting pressure on the bone. So that's also a way to do it, but you have to do something. And it
Yeah, and
keeps
it's
the
usually
blood
just it's like, oh, keep going. Go ahead.
it keeps the blood moving. And so it's like you have to have that flow, or things in your cycle are going to get stagnated too, whether you get cramps or clots or problems like that. Exercise can solve a lot of those issues.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who don't exercise regularly it can be surprising how much it helps a lot. Even just walking every day, just
Mhm.
getting the blood moving and the endorphins running, you just feel and getting into nature is a big one. It just could make a huge difference in kind of
Yeah.
all aspects of your life. So I get
I
it. There
think
are days where it sucks or you don't feel like it and you should listen to
Mhm.
yourself. But you should definitely just try to get a little movement in every day.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing for people that don't exercise is like you get into this mindset of all or nothing, where it's like, oh, I either have to do it every day or I don't do it at all. And it's like it's perfectly fine to exercise 3 days a week and like take all the other days off. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to go 5 days a week. You can start with 1 day a week and then add 2 days a week. And like days a week is really like the sweet spot of like do that or do more. Because then it's almost like every other day type activity that's evening out. But it's like you don't have, it's not really an all or nothing thing. Like you don't have to be super active every single day, but doing something for your body, 3 days a week is pretty important. I mean, this is like what we live in. Like this is our vessel for carrying out our purpose here. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we are closing in here. We got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to do a little bit of rapid fire here. Are there any other therapies or supplements or things like that that you recommend for women?
So some of the herbs that are good for just about everybody is there's one called shatavari, which is like the root of the asparagus, and you can get it in tea form or tincture form, and it's an adaptogenic herb for female health, and so it can help to regulate the cycle, get things under balance, and really like make things run smoothly for the cycle. That's like the main one that pretty much anybody could take at any time, and you can take it for the whole length of your cycle without having to like start and stop it or anything like that.
Is there like a
Um,
dose that you recommend or?
so if you get like the tincture form, which is just like a little dropper bottle, just one dropper full a day, put in your tea, or you can put it right under your tongue. They usually make them with alcohol though, so they're not necessarily the greatest tasting. But if you put it in hot tea, you can't taste it at all. So that's typically what I do with it is just put it in hot tea and then it's done. You don't have to
Okay.
taste it. That's definitely the one herb I would say like I would recommend to everybody.
All right. What do you
Mhm.
say if someone asks you how much they should be eating?
So I typically just say like you should be having your 3 meals a day and getting that 30 to 40 grams of protein at each meal. I find that the protein is really the most important thing um, for each meal.
Okay. Um, and then you touched on it briefly at the beginning, the birth control pill. That's another super controversial topic. Do you have any, thoughts on that? Is that something you discuss with your clients or do you sort of leave that and try to optimize outside of it?
So it's really hard, like, when you're on birth control, you're not having, like, a true period, you're just having, like, a withdrawal bleed from not having the hormones pumped into you from the birth control pill, and then some birth control don't get a period at all, and so most of the people I work with are either trying to come off of birth control or they're having really big problems every time they do come off birth control. Yeah, birth control just like causes all these extra problems. It depletes nutrients and minerals and makes people, gain weight or feel depressed or have all these other things that go wrong. And then it's like the doctor's only solution is, oh, we'll just try a different one. Oh, we'll just try a different one. And they just keep running through different birth control pills until they find one where you're like not complaining so much.
I have
Instead,
so many thoughts on birth control. I feel like that's going to have to be its own episode someday.
yeah.
I was on it for quite a while, like 10 years. And there was a
Mhm.
lot that I didn't understand that the impacts it had on me till I got off to, have my first daughter.
Mhm.
So it's a huge can of worms. But
Yeah.
definitely people should think twice when that's offered as a solution to them. I think that's the big takeaway, probably.
Yeah.
All right, probably the last question. What are women not talking about that they should be?
I mean, I think we should be talking more to each other and our partners about like what's going on with our cycle, how we're feeling. Because it's like the more we talk to each other, the more we realize like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, this happened to you too. This is a common problem. Like everybody's dealing with it. I know when I first started coaching, I took a lot of research calls where I just called as many women as I possibly could that would take my phone call and talk to them, and, like, literally every single one was, like had similar things. Like, I've gone to 7 gynecologists, I've tried 100 different birth controls, I've done this, they offered me surgery, I've had surgery, it didn't help, I still have the problem. Uh, Everybody that dealt with Western medicine, like, still was having issues and never got the answers that they were looking for. So I think it's like a way bigger problem than anybody realizes. And we've just been so trained over the years. It's finally starting to change to not talk about our periods. Like, oh, that's no, you don't talk about that. Like, just let it happen
Yeah.
and shut up because nobody at the table wants to hear about it.
Yeah,
Um,
I couldn't agree more. That's like the feeling of, that you're going through a thing that no one else is going through and then coming to realize that like everybody has this problem. That's kind of like the main reason why I wanted to start this podcast because I just feel like no like there needs to be more conversations about these kind of issues. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I had so much fun. I think the audience will love it too. So where
yeah,
can
for
people go to find you? I think you're on
Um,
Instagram.
Yep, Instagram's the best place to find me. It's Rebecca__Paisley. And you can shoot me a message. I typically answer in a day or two. And that's definitely the best place to find me. I also have a website that's just rebecca-paisley.com if you want to learn more about me or what I do. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
I think you mentioned something about a retreat that you host or you run.
Oh, yes. I keep forgetting about this and then I'm reminded. But yeah, so at the beginning of September, the 6th, 7th, and 8th, I'm hosting a women's retreat in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, out in the mountains. It's like a premier glamping setup. So there's running water, electricity, but you're in like a very nice premier tent.
It's awesome.
And we'll be diving into the cycle and get just building community around it, talking about it with people, and going on nature walks and sitting by the fire and doing lots of activities there. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. I'll definitely link to that one in the show notes so everybody can check that out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Rebecca as much as I did. I know both of these topics, regulating your cycle with food and also just getting rid of chemicals in your life in general, can be so overwhelming. So I do have a free guide to optimizing your cycle linked below. So just click that and get your free copy. And then I also have a guide on my website, modernnurturepod.com, that will take you through subject by subject, room by room, how to start getting rid of the toxins around you. I highly recommend not trying to do it all at once, just like Rebecca and I talked about. So if you want to get started on that journey, feel free to check that out. I do have the Toiletries section for free, so I'll link that as well. Thanks for listening again. You can follow me on Instagram at Modern Nurture Pod, and I'll talk to you next time.